Mammon, let's end this. You've controlled me long enough. I'm taking my podcast back.
Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography. I'm one of your hosts, Pierce Leiden, pronouns they, them, here with, as always,
George Marston, pronouns they, them, or she, her.
How the heck are you, George?
You know, I'm heckin' great, Pierce. As good as one can be when the future isn't as certain as it was a few weeks ago. But I'm hanging in there and, been doing some work, which has been nice, getting back to what I'm good at. And
what you're good at isn't very nice.
Well, I mean, I guess not. I've also been working on some new music for a friend of ours for a certain project that I won't name here, but if you'll definitely hear about it at least probably soon. So there you go.
That's fun. Yeah. Hey, did you see all the photos from the premiere of Masters of the Universe? How they dressed up the Chinese theater with Castle Grayskull?
I saw that. Pretty cool.
Also,
yeah,
it truly is. I was saying this, Vanessa, how much it is the year of Cyclops.
Oh, yeah. They just put him in Cosmic Invasion.
Well, and also, there's a Cyclops in the Odyssey. Cyclops is it's a Cyclopean summer over.
Yeah, it is. Hell yeah.
The cinema. And
well, as listeners probably don't know, I love Cyclops, both the character, not as much as you love Cyclops, but I love the monster, the Cyclops, quite a bit. And I won't say my personal email here, but it does include the word Cyclops. So
Cyclops Lover 69 is at
Pierce,
gmail.com.
I said don't say it.
Oh, I thought you wanted. Anyway, send.
Yeah, that's my Cyclops Lover 69. And if you email me, my name comes up as Emma Frost.
Yeah. Send all of your Cyclops fanfic to cyclopslover69 at gmail.com.
There should be an alternate reality Cyclops named Biclops.
That's just Cyclops.
No, but he'd be called Biclops.
Because
and
bisexual?
Then he'd have two lenses. Well, yes, also that. That would be the other reason. That would be the main. No, that's the main line Cyclops, frankly. Biclops at this point. I will say, I will never forgive the Jerry Duggan for going back on fucking Scott, Jean, and Wolverine being a fucking kind of a low-key throuple. I thought that was my favorite thing that's ever been written. I thought it was fantastic. I would read, honestly, if we could go back to the Krakoa era, I would make X-Men just their three-way relationship where they're sharing a bathroom and they're sitting around trying to schedule shit. Scott's going to see Emma Frost on the nights that Wolverine and Jean are together. Look, they could easily be Danger Room Polly.
Would Spawn benefit from a throuple between Terry, Al, and Wanda?
Absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. Because Al has proven that his jealousy is violent.
That's a good point. But how much of that was Mammon?
Too much. And look, would you take the risk? Mammon's still alive.
That's a good point.
I wouldn't.
All right, fine. What about Spawn?
He might benefit
Angela,
from a couple bong rips. Spawn, Angela, and Redeemer could work.
Yeah,
Redeemer is kind of Redeemer? The last one, who is kind of like the eternal sub, like God's eternal sub.
Yeah. Bobby Bootsy Cog.
which is funny. Oh no, I don't like that. That's a real lemon party, to be honest. I was just thinking about how I call my little cat Bootsy sometimes. Her name is not Boots. Her name is Lane. Usually we call her Laney, but she has a stage name, which is Laney Chiffon or Bootsy Chiffon. She has markings on her little short legs that look like boots, and she is so cute. She looks like she's wearing a little scarf, and she looks like her little nails are painted. She looks like a real star. So when she's being all like cute and making doe eyes and sprawling as she often is, we call her Chiffon or Bootsy Chiffon. That's her stage name.
Amazing.
Yep.
Well, we only have one issue to cover today, George, and that's
Correct.
because it's called The End. It's the final issue of David Hine's run. At the time that this came out, nobody knew what was in store. Well, I mean, previews exist, so people kind of knew what was in store for.
I think it's so funny, not to spoil things. I think it's so funny that this arc is called The End, and then the next arc is called Endgame.
Yeah.
These MCU movie titles.
At least it's not called The Beginning.
That's true. As Dio said, the ending is just the beginner.
Yeah, this is an interesting way to send everything out, because we'll kind of do a recap of or sort of an assessment of David Hine's run over the last 34 issues.
I'm trying to stop myself from just getting into pre-final thoughts, because boy, I have big ones.
But now somebody getting 3 years on a book that isn't a creator-owned book is just so
There are only a few of them.
Yeah.
Enemy of the pod, David Pepos, has had a couple really good years on Space Ghost. That's a pretty big accomplishment in this day and age.
I think he might be the most writer of Space Ghost at this point.
Oh, absolutely, he is.
Comics, yeah.
In comics, absolutely, 100% he is. There's just not that many Space Ghost comics, to be honest.
Yeah, it wasn't the highest bar.
No, but still, it's incredible. And honestly, if you haven't read it, it's a great fucking comic. I grew up loving Space Ghost. So honestly, when David told me he was starting that, I was like, oh my fucking God, dude. And look, we may have talked about this recently on the podcast. Everyone knows I can't remember anything but what's in the comics halfway. But that comic in particular, and I'm not just tooting David's flute because he's my pal, that comic shows what readers will respond to with superhero comics, which is they just want fucking superhero stories. First of all, they want an issue where if they read it, every issue or 2 issues is going to tell you a full story, and it's going to build to the next thing, and then you're going to get a big climactic payoff that sets the stage for the next thing. And he just gets to write a superhero comic. He doesn't every 6 issues have to come up with like the new crazy twist. Space Ghost is actually a ghost now.
Yeah.
Or whatever the fuck. You know what I mean?
I did pitch that to him and he said no. So
yeah, I'm sure he did. But we've often talked to David about storylines, and I think maybe like once has he ever been like, oh, that's a good idea, I might use that. He's usually like, that's a good idea. Here's something totally different that I came up with, which of course he's the writer. Why would he? But I think that's part of the writing process. A lot of the time is you need someone to tell you the ideas you haven't thought of to reinforce the ones you like that you have.
How much do I actually like this? Or is this a good idea, a bad idea? Speaking of, though, just being able to write an effective superhero comic, I do think that Spawn has found itself at a bit of a crossroads. I do think that David Hine has pushed it in a more like horror forward, a more horror forward focus. He's not as interested in the superhero stuff quite as much as the book has been in the past. He is interested in this larger story of good versus evil and exploring that. He has been expanding the mythos by showing kind of Spawn throughout time, different spawns, how this has manifested itself. I do think that he's done some really smart things, and we've talked about this across his run over the last bunch of episodes, but this ending is interesting, and we'll get into it shortly. But like, it is, it feels not so much like an ending. Is
Well,
basically what
I'm not going to final thoughts this whole thing, but I will give a thesis about this as we get
Sure.
into it, which is I think one of the big problems so far with Spawn, it's a twofold thing. One is, and again, bear in mind, we love this comic. We're almost 200 issues in with no plans on stopping. That's why we can talk about it critically. The twofold problem it has is one, it doesn't know how to end a Spawn story without being like, and here's the real ending, like right
Yeah.
after. And also, again, it's the Stephen King problem where like there it's hard to end the story when you know issue 184 will immediately definitely be followed by issue 185. And
That's
you
true.
presumably know the thing I feel about it is why call this the end? If it's not, you know what I mean? Like you can just call it like whatever the next chapter is. And I get it, it's the end of Hine's, run, but there's something about it that makes that moment feel anticlimactic. And we'll get into the whys and wherefores when we get through the comic here and
Yeah.
get to the end. But I think it's emblematic of the idea that okay, they know they want Spawn to keep going, so they don't feel they can give too permanent an ending. But then that means that the next thing is also an ending, and it just continues. I will say, as we get into go from the end to end game, which usually goes the other way in terms
Yeah.
of like structurally, as we get into that, we know we're coming to some kind of actual ending, or at least for some time for Al Simmons.
Yeah.
So at least there is that to see. We'll see how they pull off that dismount.
There's a balancing act here that's happening, and I don't know that it's always succeeding 100% of the time, but we're it's trying at least.
I also get why you want to bring Todd and everyone back for the end of Al's story. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, like, I get why you don't want necessarily David Hine to have that last word, but again, you can avoid that by just not calling it the end.
Agreed. Yeah, it feels like they know it feels like there's a bit of a pitch about what's going to happen next, but not a great, that isn't where Hine's story was planning on ending. And so it's a bit of an awkward transition and a bit of an awkward handoff.
And
And
it makes you wonder on the timing of when they decided to bring in, as we know will be the case, Jim Downing.
yeah,
Like, will I don't have a picture of that, so I don't know. Like, I don't have that information, but it does make you wonder: was like Hine supposed to get another like 5 issues or whatever? You know what it's going to be? Was
yeah,
he supposed to get that last chunk? And then they decided, well, we're actually going to change Al Simmons. We're going to get rid of him for a while and instead do something else, which, fair play. That's a comic book tactic. But like you wonder when they decided they were going to try to pull that switcheroo.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think before we get too final thoughty,
Yeah.
we should get beginning thoughty.
That's we getting thoughty, baby. All right. Well, on that note, Pierce, hit me with the credits.
All right, this is Spawn number 184. Todd McFarlane Image Comics present The End, story by David Hine and Todd McFarlane. Breakdowns by Greg Capullo, pencils by Brian Haberlin, inks by Brian Haberlin, colors by Andy Troy, lettering by Tom Warzakowski, production by Francis Takanaga and Diana Sanson, cover by Brian Haberlin and Gerard Van Dyke. And this one is dedicated to Rod Underhill. Rod
Okay, a
Underhill.
hobbit.
I don't know. I seemingly he's a district attorney.
Oh, okay, sure.
I don't know who else he could be.
Probably cut a deal to get Al Simmons out of jail time.
Oh no, sorry. Excuse me. Excuse me. He was he was a lawyer. He was a lawyer. He was a comic book writer, artist, and lawyer.
Oh,
He
okay.
worked on
So
he
three
worked
kinds of liar.
he worked on Airlock, which
Okay.
seems to have a panda with like
Okay.
a Jedi outfit on. He
Okay.
worked on Rubber Barons. He was the
Okay.
artist on Mike Barron's Groovin' High
Okay.
and did covers for some Robert Heinlein Friday novels.
Boy, quite a political pedigree going
Yeah.
into some of these
Yeah.
like collaborators.
I have to imagine this is just some because of his comic and then also, being a lawyer work, he just kind of crossed paths with
God
somebody on this
knows
creative team.
Cod has crossed paths with his fair share of attorneys over
Lawyers,
the day.
yeah. So we when we last saw our heroes, because at this point we are in limbo with Nyx and Al and Wanda and Cyan, and they're facing off against Morana, the thought to be lost child of
Yeah,
Al
supposedly
and
the
Wanda,
lost child of Alan
who
Wanda,
was
raised by Memon to be his vampire queen.
right, and to also be the perfect host for the K7 Letha, which was also sort of manipulated by Mammon and kind of boosted up through the ranks so that it could get into this position. There's a lot of like machinations that, like, when you start to think about it too hard, you're kind of like, this is very silly, but it's
some
fine.
of it makes sense. Like if, we talked about it last episode when they revealed how he manipulated the K7 Letha and Malbolgia and everyone else. You can see how that works. And you can see how, like, if he's, as we understand, one of Malbolgia's advisors,
Yeah.
It's
like a worm tongue.
Yeah, exactly. And he's standing, like we said, he's standing just off camera in some of those memories, whispering into Malbolgia's ear. And exactly as you said, it's just another machination that's all designed by Memon to, and we didn't really lay out the full pieces of the scheme. So here it is. Here's what Memon has been trying to do. He's been trying to find for eons the perfect hellspawn who will have enough will and enough power and frankly enough rage to rise up against Malbolgia, and not just Malbolgia, but all of heaven and hell, who can seize the power of creation from the Mother of Miracles and rebirth the world away from the prying eyes of heaven and hell, away from the machinations of God and the devil, to make way solely for the manipulation of Mammon. And so essentially he discovers that he kind of predicts and realizes that the best way to get the perfect spawn is to mingle the family bloodlines of Wanda Blake and Al Simmons going back generations, essentially to bring them together to create his perfect, offspring who would become his perfect spawn servant. So first he had to get Al to become a hell spawn so that Al could do the whole restarting heaven and hell. Then he had to get Morana in place to take on the K7 Letha, which has now been fully empowered by Al. And so his plan is to then have Morana essentially be his eternal enforcer as he conquers all of reality, now that Al has reset the playing field and delivered the K7 Letha unto Morana. If that doesn't make sense, I'm really sorry. I know explaining it like that is kind of like trying to explain the plot of Akira.
That is a really good explanation, and this is very pertinent to Hine's run as a whole. Hine's run began with Armageddon and began with this journey kind of getting kicked into high gear, right? It really began with him, with Al, Armageddon ends with Al remaking the Earth, but it also sidelines God and the devil. It sidelines these really powerful beings that are one of the only things to stand in Mammon's way. And that Earth ends up being this like third place that now, without the influence of these entities, is kind of ripe for the picking. And
Exactly.
Al is still kind of struggling with that. The one thing that it feels like Mammon has not accounted for is Cyan.
Right.
And we've seen this over time with the shoelace initially, and she's had visions and things like that. Nobody really trusts her, believes her about them except for Granny Blake. But Cyan has shown that she is incredibly adept and kind of tuned in to these supernatural powers and the things that are happening. And I think that's a really interesting way to interpret There Will Come a Child, right? We've had multiple children kind of come through the book. We had Christopher at the beginning, during Armageddon, who will return here or has returned here. We have Cyan, obviously. We have the kids who, one of whom becomes, Eddie and Andy Frank, one of whom becomes Redeemer, right? That's another set of children. We have the twins who ended up being the God and the devil. So we keep kind of getting, I don't think it's purposefully throwing us off the scent, but it is a good thing to key in on as hey, we tease this and it could go any sort of number of ways. Cyan looks to be the one, and Morana also is the obvious, There Will Come a Child. Yes, that will be the big hellspawn. Because when we see that initial prophecy, it is a child with the Spawn logo on their chest or on their stomach.
Right.
And so it does seem to be hinting at something like that. Cyan is the one unaccounted for.
Well, and to that end, when you look at all of them, Al, Wanda, Granny Blake, even the twins, absolutely, all of that, Cyan is the only one who is actually untouched by Mammon's manipulations. She is born outside of his sphere of influence, partially because it's not really necessarily his plan for Wanda and Terry to get together.
Yeah, that's just ancillary.
He needs Wanda to give birth to the twins, and so he takes advantage of that. I think that's him taking advantage of that moment to create those twins out of the same sort of bloodline that he's been manipulating. But Cyan still remains untouched. Even she has no connection to Mammon other than people trying to tell her how to resist him. And as you said, she's sort of naturally tuned in. She has an intuition that we called it trust. We called it she's trusting last issue, but she has an intuition about who to trust.
Correct.
Like, she doesn't trust Mammon. She knows he's a cosmic being beyond her ken, but she doesn't trust his word. She trusts Spawn. She trusts the Mother of Miracles. She trusts Granny Blake. She trusts this older woman who she met in her prophecy. Mm-hmm. She even trusts Nyx to some degree. She trusts Nyx and Nyx trusts her because she also has that intuition on some level. But I think you're right that Cyan is really, and she's really become one of the most interesting characters as a result.
Yeah. And it's partly because she acts the opposite of Al. When Al got superpowers, the whole time he just started asking questions, famously, right? This comes up on our show all the time. Questions, the never answers, but questions. And she doesn't ask questions. She trusts that what she's being told is the truth because she believes it to be true, which is not that she isn't discerning. Right. There are times when she's been, especially with the twins and stuff, that she felt oh, something's wrong.
Right. She doesn't trust implicitly everyone, but she has an intuition about who to trust and who is telling her something that is actually important. Yeah. And, thinking back on Al asking all those questions versus Cyan not, Al was right to be asking those questions when we look back, especially of Cog, of, basically everyone around him who is trying to get him to do a specific thing. For most of the run of Spawn, when you look back, him questioning that is very justified, because 100%. If he had just done what Cog had said and just accepted everything, he would have gone down that path, but he wouldn't have had the power to then remake the Earth. He wouldn't have gotten to that place. That would not have happened. And so when you look back, you kind of see okay, there's an intrinsic part of Al that is overly trusting of authority in a way that Cyan even isn't. He trusted Malbolgia, he trusted Jason Wynn, he trusted so many of his superiors, and it got him dead and tied to hell. So you imagine when he gets back to Earth, there's a thought crisis where he's like, who do I trust? I have to figure this out for myself, and I don't know how. But when people tell me how, they just tell me to trust them.
Right.
And that is a retroactive sort of through line that when you see it through that lens, it makes a lot of sense, especially to how we got here, where now Al feels so assured that Al is so much more assured. We talked about last issue where he just kind of mouths off to Memon. Memon's like, don't you care about the answers now? And he's like, yeah, you're right. Not all of us can be as brave as you. And it's just that he has finally gotten to the point where he's like, okay, I was right. I shouldn't have trusted any of these people. And I definitely know for a fact that I shouldn't trust Memon.
Yeah.
But the key is, even he decides to trust Cyan.
Right.
When Cyan tells him, no, we have to go do this, or when he says, I think we have to go, and she says, you're right, Al has learned to trust her because of the same reason he has come to see her in her actual role here.
Yeah. Oh, and he even pushes back on her a little bit when she allows. So one thing that's really great is when she, and we got into this a little bit in the last episode, but when she asks him to say, what makes you different from all other Hellspawn that Mammon could not have considered? And he was like, oh, like that I'm Legion, right? But like that's gone. And she's like, no, it's not. And he does push back and he's like, I'm pretty sure it is. And she's like, trust me, it's not. But the difference here is,
come.
But the difference here is that because Cyan has built up this level of trust, because she allowed him to get to the answer, right? She asked him a question for once, and that never happens. The first question he got asked after he died ruined his life, or his own life, you know? So
ruined his death, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's really, man, it does feel like we are really digging into some really, really tiny stuff here, but because
this is what's all going to matter as we get through this single issue we're covering.
Yeah, this is kind of where we're really stage setting here, and I do want to kind of queue up some of these thoughts for listeners as we go through it, and then as we get into David Hine's kind of run as a whole. So this issue opens with the older
Well, I wanted
woman.
to say one thing real quick, going back, just a quick thing, which is I think it's interesting that Cyan says, what's the one thing he can't control? Memon can't control. And I think that it's kind of fitting that it comes back to the fact that Al Simmons is the leader of the Hellspawn. He was designed and appointed by Malbolgia to be the general of the Hellspawn armies. Memon needed that to happen, but he didn't count on the fact that that meant Al Simmons actually had an army.
Yeah, that's true. Even though it is a pretty small one at this point.
Well, it's a squad, but there we go.
Yeah.
So you were about to kick us off.
Yeah. So this issue opens a little meta with the older woman that we saw in Cyan's vision earlier, saying, this is it then, the final chapter, at least for this player. I've been putting off writing it for too long. And her writing is going to be the narration that we saw in the last issue, but that gets us through a lot of this.
Right.
We saw in the last issue that the book that she has is the Book of the Dead. And presumably she's pulled that off the shelf to write in it again. And she says, so now all that's left is for me to make a record of the outcome. And we get this final battle with the Legion Hellspawn against Morana and Mammon. It is, it's not happening in montage exactly. It's just sort of being narrated.
Right. Well, we know the outcome because as Nyx in the final page of the last issue that we read last episode, as Nyx says to Cyan, the Legion are going to kick Memmon's ass, right? And Cyan's like, no, And so we learn that, yes, they are fighting them, but it's almost like when all the Jedi confront Palpatine in Star Wars Episode 3, and he just like progressively dispatches the entire Jedi Council.
Yeah.
It's kind of that, and we're getting it all crammed into like just a matter of panels. But I do love this double page spread where it's her standing in the middle, all like with this corona of green energy, as all of them are like leaping in. You see like Dark Ages Spawn in the back with his battle axes. See like the samurai Spawn. They're all there, and of course Christopher's there. Pirate Spawn is there.
One.
I like the pirate Spawn. That's really fun. Bringing in some of those like variant figures and stuff that have been out there. Really great. Love to see it. As they're fighting, Cyan explains to Nyx that they're a distraction. Someone else is going to finish this. And so Nyx says, yeah, who the hell is that? Because I don't see anyone else ready to put up a fight. And the younger samurai, her grandfather gets obliterated. She jumps in to fight. One by one, they all just get torn to shreds. Until the only ones that are left are kind of all in her clutches and progressively losing the fight.
Yeah, the only one that's free is Christopher. And
right, Christopher.
He's a little guy, so you can really tell why. You can really tell why Greg Capullo was tapped to at least provide breakdowns. We've noted before that Haberlin's not the best with action scenes in the sense that like they're extremely legible, but he'll stick to a pretty standard grid. Here, the layouts have I will not say like full 90s like Capullo craziness, but they're like a little bit.
There's a kineticism to it where there's a little, there's a little more attitude to the layouts in a way. Well, again, also, if you're kind of winding down on Al Simmons, of course you want Greg Capullo to come back and have his fingerprints on it, however he can. So Al is confronting Mammon. He's got him up against the wall, and he says, let's end this. You've controlled me long enough. I'm taking my life back. And Mammon says, you never had a life. Don't you get it? Your body was eaten by worms. It doesn't exist. Al Simmons doesn't exist. You're Spawn, and I do control that. He calls out to Marana to finish this. We get a really cool splash of Marana, like 20 feet tall, with all the like Spawn in her clutches. And Spawn is yelling, or Al is yelling, get out of here, Christopher. Save yourself. And he says, yes, but not because I'm afraid. I know what's on the other side. I've seen it. It's beyond heaven and hell, a place you can be at peace. You need to let go. Come with us. And he fades away. And I still don't think this is the last we'll ever see of Christopher. It's just kind of one of those comic book things in my head. We'll see. And I love this panel of Marana, huge and looming over Al, all wrapped up in her like thorns.
Yeah, she's very spiky, but then also has like thorny tentacles that she's attacking everybody with, as well as like
blades and everything.
One of the things I like here is that she has no trouble with the suit. She's just, and that's a classic, like, oh, here's the new villain. They know how to do the thing. They're going to beat up the heroes, but like, she just knows what to do. And it is, as Mammon said, she was built for this. And we see that come through.
And so was the K7 Letha. And so you see it fully unleashed, its host no longer resisting it, but fully embracing it. And I like that, like, her spikes are bigger and weirder, and she's got blades and thorns and chains and cape tentacles. You see that this is the, like, fully realized, fully evolved K7 Letha with like all its weapons now activated and stuff. And so Al says, screw you, I'm done buying into these lies, as she's telling him to fade away. And he says, you're not my daughter, you're not my blood, you're my enemy. And she drops him, and she says, she drops the others, and she says, you're right, I am your enemy, but don't think that'll erase the past and all that you've done to me and your wife. And Mammon's kind of taunting him. He's saying she's correct. The emotional damage you've done to Wanda will torture her forever. He's just
Never
he's
teach a
just
demon
taunting
therapy
him.
speak.
Oh my God, yeah. He's just taunting him, saying the one thing that would have made your life perfect was a child, and you let that slip away because of your anger. Now we know that Mammon actually manipulated him specifically in that moment and pushed him into harming
Really
Wanda.
groomed him into having the ability to even do that, and then pushed him over the edge and manipulated
Right,
him
used
into
his
the
psychic
action.
influence essentially.
And the saving grace that we have there is that we do know that Al felt extreme guilt over it. So he does have that like crumb of remorse
Right.
there, at
Well,
least.
and
That
not to say that just feeling guilt is enough to absolve
no,
someone,
not at all.
but he's also, I mean, he is literally was taken over by a demon
Yeah.
at the worst possible moment.
He-
A demon who groomed him to be susceptible to his manipulations and his
Exactly.
influence. So, yeah. Cyan is saying to Nyx, you have to cast a binding spell. And Nyx is like, you crazy? I don't know one that'll defeat her. And Cyan says, no, but I do. And she explains that the old woman taught it to her.
Right.
And she tells it to Nyx. And she says, right now, Spawn, she says, I'll explain it later. She learned that. She says, I'll explain it later. Right now, Spawn needs you. We all do. Today is his day of reckoning. He's going to finally realize what he must do, what he should have done long ago. Spawn, my mom, you. It all changes tonight, forever. Open yourself up to it. Now, another thing to look at here is Cyan's starting to get that energy in her eyes that looks like that Mother of Miracles kind of blue creation energy. And also something I want to say, going back to what we were talking about with Cyan, is she now has developed some of that force of personality to say to Nyx, you need to trust me. I will explain later. This is the thing that we need to do.
Yeah.
And Nyx, much like Cyan, has tapped into that intuition and says, okay. And I love this sequence of panels of Nyx like summoning the energy.
Yeah.
And as she's about to like snatch up Wanda and Al, Morana starts sort of like kind of being held back. And we see Nyx in the background saying, I bind thee. And she's casting this binding spell. She says, I bind thee, the crusade of this spawn will be finished tonight. Then you'll have to live with the guilt of knowing you were the one that truly woke him up, that you were the one who created your own downfall. Then we get a editor's note that says, next issue is the beginning of that downfall, to let you know that this isn't the downfall, I guess, that this downfall is not the downfall. This is a downfall.
Don't be surprised when there's a Spawn 185 on your pull list.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and you know, Mammon is just like, this is impossible. Like, you don't have the power to do this. And she says, well, she believes Cyan. She says, well, in the future, I do, and I know exactly where to find that power and who gave it to me.
That's right. Oh, one quick note that we didn't mention is that Cyan tells, it's very interesting. Cyan tells Nyx, this is a binding spell that you will invent in the future.
Yeah.
It was told to me by someone in the future, and now I'm bringing it back to you. If you think about it, okay, did you ever see the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie?
Yeah.
You know when they meet Scotty and they're from the future and he's in the past,
and he's like,
they're
well, I can't
here's
figure
the
out the
warp
thing.
equation. Yeah. It's basically that, which is fine. But yeah, she's like, I'll have the power in the future. And she says, Cyan just reminded me where to find it and who gave it to me. And as we know, Mammon empowered her. And this is another thing he hasn't accounted for, is the idea that she would be able to turn that connection back on him rather than him using it one way to control her. And so she's kind of castigating him. He says, you can't know that. And she says, why? Because you've lived so long without anyone opposing you. Your arrogance has become a liability. You talk about Spawn and his anger. Well, you just pinned him into a corner, the only being that can destroy you. But what's worse, you worse, goddamn you, is that this same spawn has the ability to destroy all of us, everything in existence. She's talking about Marana. So if you have a death wish, fine. But why couldn't you leave the rest of us out of this? Why did you have to doom all of us? Why? What could you possibly have been thinking? And as she's saying that, it's clearly a rhetorical question because this like web of binding is like growing up over his face and kind of gagging him, and you see like the panic on his face as he realizes, oh shit,
Yeah. And I like
this is actually happening.
And I like that, like, Cyan's like, you can feel it, right? And Nick says he's talking to me from the future, but his image is getting blacker and blacker, like he's disappearing. Something's happening.
Spawn is talking to her from the future.
Something is happening to Spawn in the future and has helped some of this along in some way. And it's kind of mysterious, but they've also bound up Marana, but she's too dangerous to leave alone.
But Wanda begs them not to destroy her.
Yeah.
She says, no, stop her, Al. And Al says, that's not your daughter or mine. She's a trap. A lie to make you believe you lost some part of you. Don't do that to yourself. Nix, do what you have to do. And here, I kind of do believe that Marana is not actually Al and Wanda's child on some level, maybe in the mystical sense, but I don't think so. And I think that, again, Memon has lied about everything.
Right. It also
maybe
could be much like
daughter,
the twins.
But there's so many possibilities. I don't think she's fully what she seems. Let me put it that way. And so Marana is kind of taunting them. She's saying, Mom, please help me. And Nix is saying, don't listen to her. Spawn's right, that this isn't what you think it is. And Cyan says we have to leave. Nix wonders if her spell will hold. Cyan doesn't know. She says, the woman also told me that staying here with Marana will consume you. I didn't want to ask what that meant. And you can tell maybe that she just give all of herself to trying to hold Marana, a vampire who would somehow drain her. We'll find out maybe, or maybe we won't. Nick says, okay, I'll get us somewhere safe with a spell. But Al stays behind. Cyan says he's not coming with us. He's going somewhere else. The old lady, she knows. And Al says, or she says, doesn't she? She knows what you're going to do, right? And Al says, did she tell you what that was? And Cyan says, no. And he says, good. You don't need to know. She asks if it'll hurt, and he says, I'm not sure, but I've got to do it. That's the only way any of this will ever stop.
Very sick panel of Al kind of tapping back into his Hellspawn powers, his eyes glowing as this kind of fractal energy kind of comes around.
Kind of interesting to see him doing that as Al Simmons now, which we know, he's not technically Al, whatever, body, necroplasm, etc. But we have very rarely, when he's been human Al, seen him able to do this without turning into Spawn.
Yeah. And then we get I really like how this scene ends between he and Wanda. We get the kind of classic Han Solo going into Carbonite, right?
I was going to say it's a twist on that.
Yeah. Where Al says, take care of them, Wanda. They'll need your strength. More importantly, take care of yourself. You don't deserve to hurt anymore. She says, Al, please. He says, I wish I could have been a better husband. She says, I love you. He says, I know you did. And they disappear.
Absolutely great moment. I mean, now that feels like a payoff with Al and Wanda to me on some level. Like, we've had that moment before, but it's always been one-sided. It's always been like, please leave us alone, or Al being like, I can't bear this anymore. Now it's them finally reckoning with the entire reason Al came back to life. Not the Memon's manipulations, not the fact that he, at this point, may have abused Wanda. It's ever clearer and less clear how that might work. And so, as he leaves, he says, I know you did. I'm grateful for that. And he takes Marana and Memon with him and disappears. And I love that moment because it's both of them saying, like, essentially saying the goodbye that they never actually got to say with
Yeah.
a true emotional equality.
They've also rarely had a conversation.
Yes.
In 184 issues, they
And Al has never
rarely talk to each other.
apologized for anything except for
Yeah.
things that he wasn't really sorry for.
Yeah, well, and that's partly because he believed a different sort of, recounting of things. But
Right.
yeah, I love it. It's the best scene in the book easily, and he teleports away seemingly in this like flash of blue light, and he ends up somewhere. And the narration, the writing of the old woman, kind of cuts back in again and says, "And so it began. Beneath a carpet of discarded souls, this spawn needed to touch the place of his birth one last time." And he's just in this like desert of faces. It is so weird and cool. You're on mute.
Yes, it's so awesome. It says he's walking on a carpet of souls. Like, again, this is very Hellraiser, very Cenobite. I love it. It is so much creepier that they're just faces than it would be if they were just an endless sea of skulls, which would be
100%.
more expected. But this is more like there's a weird, like almost labyrinthine, like Jim Henson, almost like this is scarier than if it was scary.
Yeah. It's unsettling in a way that I think Hine's work has trended in this direction overall. But this is just a really weird, interesting way to kind of show this. And he begins to walk because he doesn't know exactly what there is there for him. He's back at the beginning in a way, and he begins to walk, and day after day he walked, and every day his resolve grew stronger. And he knows that Mamon's plan has been kind of defeated. But he's not broken anymore. There's something, a fire has been lit within him.
Right. And it says that rage is driving him on, basically step after step on into infinity. And he says suddenly, I know what I have to do. The old woman writes, and that spark was soon to be turned into a raging inferno. I've seen the results of what happened after that day, and may God have mercy on those who once stood in his way. But even that prayer is hollow now, because both heaven and hell fell in the wake of Spawn's revenge, making God and his mercy nothing more than a mere memory. Al says, I know what I have to do. And she continues writing, and toppling them both, he became the greatest hero and the greatest villain known to mankind. For me, he was neither. He was and always will be exactly what I first saw in him as a child. He was the sad man. And we see that she signs the last page, Cyan Blake. Interesting that it's not Cyan Fitzgerald.
Next issue, the beginning of Spawn's new direction.
An Endgame.
Yeah, interesting that she's not Cyan Fitzgerald, but also Wanda doesn't take his name, so maybe the kids didn't take his name.
She just, it's an honor of her mother. Now, what's interesting is I don't know what's exactly coming ahead, but like Spawn already defeated heaven and hell. Is Cyan talking about him doing that yet again, or is she talking about who he became because of when he did that? And that is a genuine question.
Yeah, and especially for what we know in the future of like, well, he's going to be sort of taken off the board a little bit.
Yeah.
Or a lot of it, really. What does this mean? It does feel like they are trying to, give him an ending so that they can move forward somehow, some other way. I do think that they want to move forward with the tone of the book, but they don't want to necessarily move forward with Al Simmons as its central character. We've been moving away from Al as the central character for quite a while now. I think that was a little bit of my complaint in the last episode, is like, this whole thing kind of doesn't feel like he's super necessary to it, even though he's, a part of the machine of the plot. So,
well, I think that part of it is now that, I think there's something thematic to that, though, which I think is that part of what is now empowering him is that he actually is trusting
Yeah.
Wanda and Cyan and Nyx, and he is letting them do things that he wouldn't have let them do before. He is letting them take on parts of this fight that he would have tried to shield them from, especially Cyan, you know? So there is a level of trust. And again, I said it's about family, but it kind of is in the sense that Al actually gets a few minutes of feeling what it would have been like to have a wife and a daughter who he could trust and who would trust him.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why we get that like sort of more ensemble vibe, and also just the practicalities of getting them all in the same place. So then you don't have to go back to Wanda's house with Al, whatever, so on.
This is a Spawn who can be in the Scorched, right? Who can be part of a team, who is not the loner on top of the church, hanging off the gargoyle, not knowing what's going on. This is the more resolute, team-based superhero that like can work with others and not just be using them to his own ends like he did kind of with Sam and Twitch. The Legion kind of shows him that he is, I think I said this last episode, but like the Legion is a decent metaphor for, I think, like kind of all people, right? I do think that like everybody's kind of secret power is that we are made up of all the people who we care about and who care about us.
Right.
You know, that we take a part of them with us, you know, through life and death. And, you know, that's kind of, that's really nice thought. And yeah, here it's like made manifest, obviously. But yeah, this Al Simmons is different. I don't think we've ever heard Al say, I know what I have to do.
Very rarely. And that's the thing. I think pretty much everything from here on out, it's going to be some level of final thoughts on both the issue and David Hine's run. So something I think, again, I think there is actually a lot of evolution to this sort of version of Al Simmons here that we haven't seen before, to Hine's credit as a writer. And I think there's a lot of showing and not telling with this. Like, for example, he's not holding people at arm's length. Literally, he's not anymore. He's got Wanda essentially clutched up to him. He's holding her. He's getting a moment of physical touch with her. And it's not about sexuality. It's just about that level of human intimacy of like, I have skin. I have a face. There is a real humanity to me right now. And also, I think it's important that he is showing who he really is as Al Simmons. When Memon is fully unable to manipulate him, when his hands are off the wheel and Al gets to actually drive, he is someone who cares for and wants to protect Wanda and wished he could have built a life with her. And I think it's clear that whatever actually happened, whatever is illusion, whatever is lies, without Memon's influence, maybe Al and Wanda wouldn't have met, but if they had, they'd just be raising their child or children. Al might not even have continued being an assassin.
Right.
He might not have ever been one in the first place. He might have been working in an office with Terry.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of so there's something I wasn't able to find an interview with David Hine from the end of his run, but I did find a couple from CBR at the beginning, during Armageddon, and a little bit kind of towards a little after that in like the 170s. And it's really interesting. He's kind of breaking down what is important to this character, and that many characters are beholden to sort of guilt of like a past thing. But for Al and Spawn, it's always been about memory. It's always been about this sort of like this journey to recapture something that was lost, but that we as readers have never really been able to know the truth. I think that's why Mammon works as such a good manipulative kind of Loki kind of villain, is that when he says, well, this is what I did, and this is why the thing you remember isn't the way it's supposed to be, and this is why you can't trust your own thoughts, it resonates because nothing, even the things that Al thought was true, right? He had this sort of like halcyon vision of what his relationship with Wanda was like. And as we found out more and more, we saw it wasn't really exactly like that. And like you said, without Mamon's manipulation, maybe he doesn't even become the guy that we meet in issue 1, right? That we see in these flashbacks, the guy that goes to war, the guy that kills people. Maybe he doesn't even have the capacity for that. And that's the tragedy of the character. But I love the idea that Hine was like, he's tortured by memory, even when those memories are kind of like splayed out in front of him. He still is this like inherently untrusting character. He still is this inherently untrusting character that needs to parse through. He has like the ultimate PTSD, I guess, right? Where it's just like everything's traumatic and it's almost impossible for him to get past. And yeah.
I think Hine really keys into that too. And that's a theme that's been there since the start of Spawn. I mean, that's really why he is Spawn, is because he's haunted by memory. Even in death, he's haunted by the memory of what he lost.
Yeah.
And he's willing to give up any chance at, just peace. He doesn't understand what he's agreeing to solely because of that sense of loss and that feeling of memory. And I think that Hine does such a great job finding that theme and keying into it and bringing that and most of the other themes of Spawn. I feel like he does a great job of bringing them into a modern context. Mm-hmm. Whereas like the way those were communicated in the early days, it's valid and it's there, but it's more like, I'm Spawn and I'm sad about this.
Well, I do think that, so we've had a lot of issues that were written by Todd McFarlane, and, the knock against Todd is that he's not the best writer in the world, maybe a little simplistic, but I do think that bringing Holguin on as a co-writer did help bring a little bit of depth to, or not a little bit, a lot of depth to the character and the journey that he was on. It's interesting. Hine really does take the book in a different direction. And Holguin, while he wanted to deepen Spawn's sort of kind of literary bona fides, right? We got into more Bible stuff, absolutely, but also more references to classic literature and kind of tying Spawn into some of those themes and ideas, the William Blake of it all, et cetera, et cetera. Hine goes the other way and says, well, this is kind of a genre exercise. There's another quote in this interview where he says, Spawn is essentially a horror story, but there are elements of the superhero genre, science fiction, and film noir. When Sam and Twitch appear, the book mutates into a crime thriller. Then there's the whole religious angle where I get to write stuff that would have had me burned at the stake in less enlightened times. We can deal with serious issues or just go apeshit crazy and have fun for a couple of issues. We had one episode where a teenage Japanese girl goes ninja on a town full of zombies, and I'm planning a point of view story coming up in a few months where the entire issue will be seen through the eyes of an amnesiac vampire. What's not to like?
We read all of those.
And I do think that he really came at this assignment with, what can I do? What can I do that doesn't break the character? And the reality is that Spawn ends up becoming is much like Batman, right? You can put Batman in like any sort of like caveman Batman or whatever, and everybody just goes, yeah, that's Batman. Got it. What's his deal? He's Batman. Understand. Spawn's kind of the same way. Now, obviously, like the action figures and stuff help, but you're not really thrown at all by a World War I episode or issue, a samurai issue, a ninja issue. You're just kind of like, okay, cool, let's do it.
I think oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
The fact that he's able to do that while still delivering these stories that tie back to the larger themes of Spawn and his larger mythos, really impressive.
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that Hine seems to know what this is.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to know how he needs to approach this, which is people want that issue of Samurai Spawn or, Pirate Spawn or World War One Spawn. They want those issues because they've been a part of Spawn since the beginning. I mean, hell, all the way back to the medieval Spawn issue, which was very, very early in the run, within the first dozen issues. And so you get he gets that he has to do those things, and also he understands how to make them relevant to the story, so that like we loved that World War One issue, especially
really
the art. Wasn't that Mike Mayhew who did the art in that one? So good. And also it was like, oh, this really did teach us something about this character on some level.
Mm-hmm.
This really did teach us something about Spawn and this mythos and tie it back to that bigger world. It's almost like the X-Files. Fans want those Monster of the Week episodes, but they want the moment in those episodes where the smoking man shows up to like say something that will come back the next time they do the run of Myth Arc episodes, as they're called. It's that kind of serialized storytelling. And I think Hine is just so good at nailing both the on a level of construction what Spawn is as a book, but also thematically what it really needs to be saying in order to feel like it's coming to some kind of compelling ending of a chapter. And I think that it's something we've talked about before with his run. It seems like he was able to go back, look at everything, and be like, okay, these are the 5 things that I have to make line up as dominoes for this post-Armageddon story. And then he goes, and these are the next 5 dominoes from the past that I have to line up to get to the next part of Mammon's plan.
Yeah.
And he's good at picking out which things to address when. We kind of evolved our opinion on that as the story went on, as I recall, because, of course, jumping in the post-Armageddon story, it very much is kind of flying by the seat of its pants a little bit, and it is doing what the next arc is going to have to do, which is following up what is meant to be a big climactic ending.
Yeah. So question for you now that we're at the end of Hine's run, and he has kind of flitted around with and flirted with different genres. He's also had a number of different artistic collaborators, and we started things out with Philip Tan and a much more, I'd say, traditional superhero style book, but we settled into Brian Haberlin with kind of, Mike Mayhew and Gerard Van Dyke along the way, and now the return of Greg Capullo, at least on breakdowns. What do you think? Do you think that actually a part of our opinion changing is that Haberlin's style and his sort of Bolland-esque, very legible storytelling was actually a boon to what Hine is trying to do thematically, and allowed us to kind of track those threads a little bit easier than we would have with than honestly we did with like Angel Medina, for instance, or even Philip Tan early in that. We had only a couple of issues with him, but and we really liked some of the aspects of those issues. But I don't know. What were your thoughts on kind of the artistic collaborators? Because as opposed to Todd's run or even Holguin's run that are largely Greg Capullo, Hine has had to write for a lot of different artists.
Oh, it's Haberlin all the way, though. And I think it's partially because what you said. We've harped on this enough times. We talked about it last episode. I'm sure our readers or our readers, listeners, whatever, are sick of us just going back to the same wells here. But it's his understanding and knowledge of what Spawn is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like, what it needs to have to tell the story. Probably even what he wanted to do when he was looking at other people's art and coloring it, looking at, Medina, looking at, because he was coloring back all the way back that far, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he was on the book for a long time before he started being the one kind of driving the plotting and storytelling in the art. And I think he was just so primed for it. Much like Al was primed to be a killer, Haberlin was primed to be a fantastic Spawn artist. And I think it's also exactly what you said, which is that it really allows Hine to lay back with some of the telling, and the showing is very clear a lot of the time. Maybe there are points when it's a little less dynamic than other artists would be, as we see in this final stretch where he's collaborating with Greg Capullo. But there were very few moments throughout his run on the book where you or I had to go like, wait, is that this character? Which happens at other times, especially with like, Medina. I feel like that was a thing where it'd be like, wait, what just happened? Haberlin has those moments, as no comic artist is perfect and doesn't have to be.
That's not true.
But
Jack
I feel
Kirby was
like
perfect.
Well, I think part of what made Jack Kirby perfect was that he was not afraid of imperfection.
True.
But yeah, he knows what the assignment is, as they say, and he and Hine are able to, as a result, kind of just dial in on these moments and dial in on delivering like these little payoffs that build up. And that's what I was saying before, is that like, in the beginning, it felt like, okay, he's kind of just only picking up these few things. Where's everybody else?
Yeah.
And throughout his run, it feels like he has progressively come back to those things and layered them back in. Really, the only thing that I think that's still outstanding that I have so many questions about is what the fuck happened to Cog.
Yeah.
Because he was like king of hell, building a tower, and they kind of just left it there. It seemed like that was going to be a thing, but...
So one thing that has been true of, like, Hine has kept moving this plot forward, but he's not been especially interested in setting up an A plot, B plot, C plot, D plot, and then as he moves forward the A plot, sort of slowly moving those other plots along so that one of them can eventually take over as the A plot. It's now... I think on some level that's a slightly more modern sensibility than we were getting in 2008 necessarily. Plus, although that's not necessarily true, because I mean that's how basically all Claremont books work, and how Marv Wolfman and George Perez on Teen Titans are as well, if we're going to hold up two of the all-time greats at that. But Bendis is very good at that as well. We kind of saw a little bit of that in Hellspawn. Dan Slott is kind of excellent at that as well, for having a years-long run on Spider-Man. I think
for the time he got, Hine did a great job.
Yeah, I would be curious to know if there was supposed to be more, but
yeah,
because if I'm going to throw a big critique at this end of this arc, the sort of future cyan kind of like, you can use your magic power from the future because I said you could. It's not the most satisfying thing in the world. I would have loved for like, if we gotten a hint of that somewhere else ahead of time.
I liked the glimpse at future cyan, and I think that's important because it's setting up the idea that her importance as a character does not end here.
Right.
It's setting up stakes that somewhere down the road, and we know that this is true, she'll come back into the book in a way that isn't expected by what you know of her before. And she is still touched by this power. She is still a part of the tapestry of Spawn and what's important about his reality. And I like that it does the elegant thing of being like, I'm cyan at the end, but it doesn't show you the world outside her window. Literally, it doesn't show you what's beyond the veil of what she is showing her younger self. She doesn't even tell her younger self who she is. That's a payoff for us, so that we know, oh shit, cyan doesn't just have the shining in this episode. You know what I mean? Like, this is going to be a thing later. There will come a child, and she'll, which I like. I like that it does. That is a good example of like leaving a thread for the next person or somewhere down the road to me.
Yeah, I think I mean it more from the Nyx side of things. I would have liked to see her. She kind of got like super powers from Mammon, and we got shown that she can do some extra stuff, and it was kind of left at that. And I find her such an interesting character, and I know that in the future she'll become Queen of Hell. But like, I find her such an interesting character that it feels, and the way Hine talks about her is really interesting too. That what she does is driven by unconditional love for Al Simmons. Is that like that's how he writes her, is that she will do
Right.
anything for him because she just unconditionally loves this man and also feels guilt for betraying him, you know.
Right.
In another,
They have a lot of emotional ties and complexity and stuff.
and like similar journeys in the sense that like, oh, I cared about you, I betrayed somebody I cared about, and now I will do whatever I can to make up for it. But in terms of like the sort of, well, we got to wrap up this this story arc.
I get what you're saying.
Here, you can do a magic trick. It's not.
I think it's a writing solution.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a story solution. It's a writing solution, which is I have to pay off Nyx's power, especially because she has a connection to Mammon. We can use that to defeat Mammon. I need to have some connection, something for Cyan to bring back to her. And just like I need to hint that Cyan has more importance in the future, I want to hint that Nyx also has some level of importance in the future. I think I brought you the spell you'll create is kind of like, it's a little Back to the Future-y, it's a little hokey or whatever. Like I said, it's a writing solution. It's him going, okay, if I do this, that is threading the needle, and that is more important with the page count and space that I have and what I need to pay off than trying to find a solution that would maybe be a little more like a little less far-fetched or a little less hokey, but having to spend another 8 panels on it or whatever.
Yeah, I think also it solves the problem of, well, I have an artist. If I have to ding Haberlin for one thing, he's not a great action artist, right? Well, I have an artist who's not great at big superhero fight scenes. I haven't been.
I mean, he's done a good job. I wouldn't say not great. I would say he doesn't have the same energy for them that someone like Capullo does.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Sure.
And similarly, Hine hasn't been super interested in writing a superhero book. In the okay, time for the knockdown, drag out fight. You know, here's Captain America versus the Red Skull. And
a lot of those fights have been with like gunslinger Spawn.
Right, exactly. And they're Western still. It's still like a Western fight for the most part. You know,
yeah.
So it's still a genre. It's just not necessarily a superhero genre. That's what he's done kind of the whole time. Even the fight Monster in a Bubble, right? It's the end of Akira, as we kind of said, right? It's like still not really a superhero fight. So I do think that the end, and I think that Marana having the K7 Letha does kind of put Hine in a position of like, well, Al can't resolve this. There's no way that he's going to be able to do anything because the only thing he's got going is the Legion, and I have to sort of also take them off the board in a way. So, yeah.
Well, I think some of that with like the Legion, and again, we talked about this thematically. I think some of it is that all this time, Spawn has been trying to regain his humanity, or Al has wanted to regain his humanity. There have been times he's been like, no, I don't want to be human at all.
Yeah.
But you know, inside he hates himself because he's not human. Through all of this, the thing that would make someone human, make them the most human, that he just eschews and rejects and runs from, is any kind of connection. And so to actually see not a fully realized Spawn, not necessarily necroplasm and K7 Letha fully realized in that way, as we see with Morana, but fully realized as Al Simmons, where his real strength is the friends he made along the way. No, he's learned that there are people he can trust. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
He really couldn't trust Cog. So when Cog was trying to push him to just blindly follow, well, you can see why he, wouldn't have gone
Bristled
there.
at that, yeah.
And now, it is an ensemble story, and I think that's actually important because there's a time when Spawn would not have survived this by himself. If he had tried to go in there by himself, if he had said, Nyx, Cyan, everyone wait outside, don't come in, it would have been that. You know what I mean? And they would have had to fight Marana anyway.
Yeah.
But the strength there is that they go in together. They know to trust each other. At this point, they have learned they can trust each other. Even Wanda knows she can trust Al to some degree because they've had this moment where they've had it revealed to them by Memon that it is his fault.
Yeah.
And maybe even his lie or whatever, that what happened between them, the abuse by Al, that was all on Memon, not all on Memon's shoulders because it was Al's body, but his body was operating under Memon's control, essentially. Yeah. She has had that understanding now, and he has apologized. And she has gotten to say to him, I cannot and do not and will not forgive you. And he has accepted that. He didn't say like, well, fuck you then. He said, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right. And I think that is what Al has always lacked on some level, is a sense of humility. He has a sense of humiliation. He has a sense of deprecation, both from himself and others. He has a sense of desolation. But at no point does he have any humility. He's always like, I am the fucking world famous government assassin. I'm going to handle this. The only times he's ever trusted anyone are Sam and Twitch. And even then he's barking orders at them and being like, you'll have to do things beyond your comprehension that you don't want to do. Thanks for literally following me into hell. Here he's got a tenderness, even just a spark of that again, it makes sense to bring all them together. Now, is that the most important payoff for just Al? Maybe not. We're going to get more of that though. And to your point about superheroes and the idea of a superhero comic that's not quite what you're expecting, I think if you're gonna take away part of Al's, if you take away part of the story, or you take away part of the like one of the layers, the superhero aspect is the part that's the easiest to kind of just step back from a little bit. Yeah. Because, he there's so much more to Al Simmons and to Spawn now than just the trappings of a guy in a cape who can throw green energy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, on a lot of levels, it didn't even seem like something that Todd McFarlane was all that interested in the early goings.
Right. And why he's said, things to that effect himself.
So... well, I think that just about wraps it up on David Hine's run. When we get back into it, Todd returns, and we've got a new artist in tow as well.
That's right.
Mr. Will Portacio.
We'll see how it goes.
Is that right, actually? Am I wrong? I think that's
I don't know if it is. I don't know. I can't remember. Let me look. We're on 185.
It is. I'm right. Will's Portacio.
Cool.
And Todd will be back on inks, I think, somewhat importantly. And Brian Holguin returns as co-writer. So
there you go, getting the band back together for the finale on some level.
Yeah. We've got new colorist. Tom Warzkowski still working on the book.
Naturally.
Capullo on the cover. Anyway, before we go, George, do you have any recommendations for our listeners?
You know what? Yeah, I'll give you a cool recommendation. Go watch some Ray Harryhausen movies. Clash of the Titans, fucking The Voyages of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts, any of these. There's so many of them. Just watch some of that Ray Harryhausen pre-computer, just absolutely analog, handmade, stop motion art that's part of, so many cool movies. Jason and the Argonauts, one of the best stop motion sequences
yeah.
ever, with the skeletons fighting Jason and his warriors. It's just so cool and so impressive. You can find books about him. You can find, background stuff. But yeah, no, just look up some Ray Harryhausen shit. Hell, just watch Clash of the Titans. It's so sick. It's so much fun. So there you
Hell
go.
yeah. I have, I guess, a similar recommendation, because I've just been kind of digging back into them. But go watch the old Godzillas. Go watch the old
hell
Toho
yeah.
era Godzillas. For a slightly different take on monster making than Harryhausen. But yeah, I don't know. I love that. I love those old Godzillas. I have the big Criterion collection. It's
Amazing.
Great. Big,
I mean, I
gigantic
just
book.
love monster movies,
Yeah, me too. Anyway, that's all for this one. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to follow us on the internet, find us at Spawnography or Spawnography Pod. We did get a request to do like Summer Salmon Twitch. I'm still figuring out what that will look like. But I'm sure we might do it at some point, or we'll do it at some point. I think we might want to get through this next big arc, and then it might be after that. But it's coming.
We promise that we will find a way to deliver it to you in a cool fashion.
Yeah. And yes, it will come with a new theme song. If you want to send us an email and tell us how nice you are going to be to us, or how much you like the show, you can send an email to spawnographypod@gmail.com. Nice and easy. But anyway, George, for Todd so loved the world,
he gave his only begotten Spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn. Spawnography is recorded in Athens, Georgia, and Queens, New York. It's produced by me, Pierce Lyden. Our theme music and logo were composed by George Marston. Episodes come out every Monday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe. You can find us on social media at Spawnography or at SpawnographyPod. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can do so at SpawnographyPod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time, see you later, Hellspawn.